What's up, guys? You are listening to the Coach Sam Show, spelled Coach 5 a.m. I'm a coach in a bunch of different roles. One of those is a fitness coach, where I lead 5 a.m. workouts 5 times a week. I'm the football coach at Hanover High School. I'm also a leadership coach for small businesses and teams. And then I'm also a part of an awesome group that's heading up the school Train Up Academy. And that group includes my wife and two of our closest friends, Ben and Alyssa Smith. You'll hear all about that and more, but my hope is that you learn more about leadership, you learn more about what it means to be a great husband and a great dad, and you learn about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. I don't have all the answers, but we're going to explore those together. Can't wait for you guys to listen. Hope you enjoy it. All right, guys, we are here for episode 2. This episode is going to be about passion over passivity. And I'll tell you, I am excited, a little bit nervous about this one because I know I could talk for hours and hours and hours about passion over passivity. To be honest, there's nothing that frustrates me more than a passive man. To be passive, to be purposeless. Gosh, it is a frustrating thing to see. And I know that when we start talking about passion over passivity, that I can just start rambling and rambling and rambling. So if you see me looking up, I'm looking at notes. I'm trying to make sure we're staying on track. And I'm just praying that I can articulate this well for leaders, for husbands, for dads, and then for followers of Jesus. Just praying that we can do that. So stay with me as we kind of work our way through this and dive into this concept of passion over passivity. So of the inequalities that we have, one of them is actually conviction over emotion. And we'll talk about that one later, but that one, simply put, is this: what we know is conviction. Okay. And what we feel is emotion. And what we know always has to override what we feel. So when you talk into that one, sometimes it can feel like we don't value feelings and emotion in general. That's not the case for that. What we're talking about is when there's a conflict between what we know and what we feel, we have to go with what we know, because we know that our heart can turn on us. One moment we can feel one thing, the next moment we can feel another thing. So we have to value what we know over what we feel. But it's really important that we understand conviction over emotion is true, but also passion over passivity is true. And the way we've kind of made those two work is passion is controlled. Think of that as a controlled fire. Emotion is uncontrolled. Okay, that's a wildfire. Fire is neither good nor bad. Okay, but it's all to do with the control and the purpose. So passion is the controlled fire. A fire is good if it's in your home and it's warming your home and it's controlled in the fireplace. A fire is not good when it's uncontrolled wildfire and it's destructive. So it all has to do with the intention, with the purpose behind it. So what passion over passivity is, what passion is in general, the way we're going to define it for this episode is taking extreme ownership of your responsibilities with enthusiasm. Taking extreme ownership of your responsibilities with enthusiasm. Leaders, you should be the most enthusiastic people on the planet. And you should take extreme ownership of your responsibilities. Husbands, same thing. Dads, same thing. And followers of Jesus, of course, same thing. We need to take extreme ownership of our responsibilities. Extreme ownership of our responsibilities with enthusiasm, because we have every right and every reason to be pumped up about our role, whatever role God has given us. So, where does passivity come from? I believe that passivity comes from us being disconnected from our purpose. Simply put, when we feel like what we're doing doesn't matter, we're going to be passive. Okay, and you see the extreme versions of this with depression, severe anxiety, and these suicidal thoughts. But people have become disconnected from their purpose. And that can happen from getting overwhelmed, feeling like we're not enough. But passivity comes from being disconnected from our purpose. Now, the biggest thing as far as communication goes, what I'm praying for right now is that I can articulate this really, really well, especially this next story, because this next story is going to frame our entire conversation. And this story actually comes from my buddy Ward Smith. Love him to death. He was telling me the story the other night in a book that he read that was called Leaders Eat Last. And I think it's by Simon Sinek, and he has a ton of great videos out on this. But this story, I believe, was in chapter 13, and it was talking about the Nazi regime. Okay, and you'll have to stick with me on this. Make sure you're really trying to listen to the details. Again, I'm going to try to articulate this as well as I possibly can. But think about the Nazi regime. Think about the mass immorality that happened and how many people needed to be involved in this. It wasn't just the leader, but it was all the people underneath of that leader who were carrying out these orders. And after the war, they were actually putting these people on trial, and they were asking them, how on earth could you do this? And the people that were the people underneath the leader actually following these commands and carrying out these orders. What their excuse was I was just carrying out orders. I was just doing what I was told. And it's amazing to think that these people could just do what they were told, even when it meant inflicting so much harm and killing an entire group of people. And they could just follow orders without even questioning why. So there was this scientist that was really curious about the psychology behind this. How could people just carry out these orders and not even question and not even push back? How could they just do that? Surely there was something off in their brain. Surely they were psychopathic. So he constructed this experiment. And what they were trying to do was find out who had psychopathic tendencies and what led to that. So here is the experiment. They got a group of scientists to be the students in this experiment. And then they had these volunteers, okay, to be the teachers. And the volunteers were told that what they were doing, they were a part of this memory and learning experiment. And they were going to ask these questions that were scripted, and these teachers would know the answers to. And the students, if they got it wrong or if they refused to answer, then they were going to be shocked. And there were these increasing intensities of these shocks the more they got it wrong. And remember, the people that were in on the experiment were the ones getting shocked. They were the students. The people that did not know what was going on, those were these teachers. And then they also had someone right there that was going to be the leader of the experiment, okay, in a lab coat. He was going to be playing the scientist role. He was also in on the experiment. So you had this scientist communicating to this person who did not know what really was going on, this teacher, this volunteer, and then you had this student who was also in on that. Okay, so like I said, what would happen is the teacher would be asking the student a question. If they got it wrong, they dial up the intensity on this shock. Now, of course, there wasn't actually a shock, but the volunteers thought there really was a shock that was happening. And on this knob, on this increasing intensity of the shock, what was written on this knob was the different levels. Okay, so the voltage went from 15 volts all the way to 450 volts. And at each level, it showed how it was more severe. Okay, so maybe 15 to 100, it said like a moderate shock, and then it said a more extreme shock. And then there was one that went all the way up to 400 that said danger, and then 400 to 450 just had red markings on it and had XXX. And everybody was pretty clear what that meant. That meant that in their mind, they were killing this person. Okay. And what they did, they separated them into 3 different groups. Okay. You had one group where the teachers were going to physically place the student's hand, okay, on this shock, a shock sensor, okay, whatever you call it, where they placed their hand on this shock pad. Okay. And then you had this other group where the teacher was going to administer the shock, and they weren't going to be touching him, but they were going to be in the same room. So they could see the person's reaction. They could see their pain. They could see their discomfort. They could hear them begging them to stop and crying out for mercy. And then there was this last group where they were in another room, and they couldn't hear them screaming. They couldn't see them, but all they could hear was them banging on the wall, begging for mercy by the banging on the wall. So these 3 different groups. And what they were trying to see is when these teachers who didn't know what was going on, who didn't know that this was a setup, when these teachers would refuse to administer the shock, knowing that they were potentially killing these people if they kept going up on it. And it was simple as just a memory and learning experiment in these teachers' minds, in these volunteers' minds. And what these scientists would do is every time that they objected, they had something that they were going to say. Now, I can't remember all 5 things that they were going to say, but the first one was like, please proceed. And then the second time they objected, it got a little bit more intense. The fourth time they objected, they said, you have no choice. You need to do this. You have no other option. You need to do this. That's what they told these people. And then if they objected a 5th time, they would stop the experiment and they would let the subjects in on what was going on. Okay, so here's what they found out. And I'm not saying this is a morally correct experiment. I'm just saying it's very, very interesting what happened. Here's what they found out. All right. The people that actually had to place their hand on it, okay, 70% of the people that actually had to place their hand on this shock pad did not go through with it. They thought that only 2 to 3% would go through all the way through the experiment, but 70% did not go through with it. That leaves 30% that did. So think about that for a second. 30% of people that were placing their hand on the experiment, although they all were uncomfortable with it, did not object, did not step up and say, this is wrong. I shouldn't do this. 30% of people, when they were actually physically placing their hand on it. So then the next group, that number goes to 40% that did not, that continued on with the experiment and went all the way through with it. And then the last one, the last group, when they were disconnected from them, it goes all the way up to 70% of the people who were disconnected from that group, who couldn't see them physically, went all the way through with the experiment, went all the way through with it. Only 30% did not go through with it of the people that could not see them. They turned that dial all the way up to XXX because they were told they had to. You have no choice. Now, granted, all of them were uncomfortable. It even mentions that some of them were shaking and sweating and crying and all this other stuff, but they still went through with it because they were told they had to. And there's so many implications of this as leaders, as husbands, as dads, as followers of Jesus, but just let that sink in for a second. And then they went on to ask these individuals who went through with it, hey, why did you do it? And first off, they got really, really mad. They were like, why would you put me through this? Why would you do this? And they started blaming the people running the experiment. They said, it's your fault. You're going to get in trouble for this. You shouldn't have done this. Start blaming them. Some of them even blamed the students. And they said, why would the student do this? Why would he allow me to do this? It's his fault. He deserved to get shocked. Can you imagine that could be you and me? Now, something really, really interesting. The people that didn't go through with it, 100% of the people that did not go through with it, that fully objected the 5 times, said, I can't do it anymore. I'm done. Do what you want to me. I'm not doing it anymore. The ones that essentially passed in this experiment, they all claimed to be accountable to a higher authority. All of them. Some of them were religious. Some of them just felt like there was going to be an authority above them, but they all claimed to be accountable to a higher authority. Wow, they had an awareness of a higher authority. They had an awareness there. That experiment is unbelievably telling. Would we stand up and do what was right, or would we passively just follow along because we're uncomfortable with doing what is right? You've been called to your responsibilities. You've been absolutely called to your responsibilities, and it is important that we step up and we do them well. We do them with everything that we have, that we do not do them lazily, that we do not do them passively, but we give all that we have to them in each area. Life is not about this balance, right? It's not about like, all right, I give half of myself to work and half of myself at home. And that, no. It's about giving everything we have in all areas of our life. We don't just turn on and off. That's not how it works. Whatever you've been called to, you've been called to do that with every single ounce of your being. Gosh, I pray that at the end of my life and at the end of your life, when we cross that finish line and we step into eternity, I pray that I am panting joyfully out of breath, looking at my Savior face to face and hearing those words, well done, good and faithful servant. I hope that I hear that, and me just exhausting every opportunity that I have to go have impact on this earth. I hope and I pray that I am not someone who is backpedaling through the finish line, but giving every single thing that I have. So I want that experiment to frame our conversation. We are not called to be passive. We are called to passionately own our responsibilities with enthusiasm. All right, so let's talk to that first group, because you remember we're always talking to those different groups. This first group's going to be leaders, then we're going to talk to husbands, then we're going to talk to dads, then we're going to talk to followers of Jesus. And the idea is that we'd start surface level with leaders, and then we dive deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, okay, into the heart of God and what he has for us. All right, that's the heart behind this. Now, with leadership, there's still so much you can get out of this with passion over passivity. And the leadership, the way we want to talk through this, there's two different categories. Let's talk through you as a person, as the leader, and then let's talk through what you're responsible to your team, whoever you're leading, whatever company you're leading, whatever sports team you're leading. So we're going to talk through you as a person, as a leader first, and then you as a member of leading that team. Okay, so let's talk personally. All right, you as a leader. And again, I'm looking up here. When we're talking about leading and being passionate for yourself, think about this. Last week we talked about you over me, so it's about others. It's not about ourselves. And when I'm talking about owning yourself as a leader first, I'm not talking about for your own benefit. I'm talking about for your family's benefit, okay, for your team's benefit. You yourself have to model leadership. You yourself have to model what it looks like to be passionate and not passive, to operate in passion over passivity. I tell our players this, but I would much rather tame a lion than try to make a house cat wild. And I don't know if I came up with that. I don't know if I heard that somewhere, but it's kind of like one of those things where you say it so often that you kind of adopt it as your own. So I might not have come up with that. But I would rather tame a lion than make a house cat wild. I would rather you be so passionate and I have to reel you in than you being Eeyore walking into the building every day. I'd rather you just be oozing with passion and intensity, and we've got to kind of rein you in, than being someone who's timid and shy and scared. Okay, so that first thought is, man, I want to be the lion in the building, that lion in the building. Okay. The next thought that I want you to think through is your joy, I believe, is directly correlated to the amount of responsibility you have. And I got this from Jordan Peterson, but he's talked about this before. But responsibility, joy, and purpose are all connected. If you're feeling like you are depressed and you feel like you have no purpose, ask yourself if you really have been diving into your responsibilities that you've been given, whether that be work, whether that be home. Your responsibility and your joy are actually connected. Own your responsibilities. Go give it everything you have. Whatever job you've been given, own it. Own it. If you're faithful with little, you can be faithful with much. So own that responsibility. Okay. Let it no longer be cool or cute to be the passive guy, to be the one that doesn't care. No longer allow that to be cool or cute. Like when you're 15 and you're young, you're going through maturity and trying to learn it, and you're learning how to be a man, I get it. But if you're 20, if you're 24, 25, 26, gosh, if you're 30, man, it is no longer cool or cute to be passive. It's no longer a funny thing. It's no longer a funny thing to be the guy that's always late. It's no longer a funny thing to be the guy that's just all over the place. It's no longer a funny thing to be the guy that doesn't work out, the guy that doesn't take care of his health, the guy that doesn't eat right, the guy that gets drunk every weekend. It's no longer cool, cute, or funny. The older you get, it becomes sadder and sadder and sadder. And if you're in that position, man, there is an abundance of grace for you. And I would lovingly tell you, wake up. Wake up, there's more for you. There is absolutely more for you, right? The way that we live speaks volumes without you even saying a word. The way we live speaks volumes. And leaders, the way we live should be something that we want other people to model. If you are leading anybody, whether that be a team, a business, your home, your family, if you are leading in the church, it is not acceptable to not take care of yourself. And I'm talking about even physically. It's not acceptable. Now, you might think, well, Sam, of course you'd say that. Like, you run fitness classes and you're all gung-ho about all this. I get it. But it's no longer acceptable. If you want to gain credibility with the people that you're leading, you've got to first be credible. You've got to first be credible. If you want other people to follow you, you've got to be someone that is worthy of being followed, right? If you're the one that's constantly not taking care of himself, you're no good for others, because people are looking to you as a model on the way that they should live. So we need to consider that. We need to consider that. It's no longer cool, cute, funny to be that passive guy who doesn't care about what he's doing and doesn't care about the impact that he's having. You've been called for more. You've been called for more, and it's a daily choice. So leaders, I'm begging you, don't be passive. My brother has this saying with Build, the performance coaching company, leadership coaching company, and with his real estate team, that average sits on the bench. And it's not that, like, if you're in a backup role that you're average. That's not necessarily what that means, but average just sits and waits. Average just sits around waiting for things to happen, right? And that's not even true. Allow me to say this real quick in this section. I know it's in this section, but allow me to say it. That's even true of our walk with the Lord, right? Like, there's a difference between passive faith and active faith. There's a difference between those two things, okay? And there's this picture of, there's two people that are praying and believing for rain. One person is sitting around in their house just praying and believing for rain. The other one is plowing the field and preparing for the rain to come. So there's a difference. Let's go live with purpose. Let's go live with actual real life faith and go live that out. Average sits on the bench. So leaders, personally, it starts with you. Okay, now let's talk about your team. Let's talk about the things that you are responsible for with your team. Okay, first off, you're responsible for the team's energy in the room. Okay, and I know that sounds like a vague thing, like the energy, and we talk about that as a football team a lot. And what we're talking about is like the communication, the effort, the intensity. That's what we're talking about when we say the energy in the room. You're responsible for that. And we talk about being a thermostat over a thermometer. So the thermostat, we'll start with the thermometer. The thermometer reacts to the temperature and it adjusts accordingly. Whatever the temperature is, it'll tell you exactly what it is. So if it's 76 in the room, that thermometer says 76. It's exactly what it is. Okay, so leaders can't afford to just go into a room and be like, all right, this is how the team's feeling today. I'm just going to be right here. Because if the team's down, I'll just be down. If the team's up, I'll just be up. That's not what we're called to do. That's not passion. That's being passive. That's just allowing everything else to dictate. Okay. Passionate people are the thermostats. What do thermostats do? They set the temperature in the room. And first, they analyze where the temperature is at. Right? They analyze where it's at. So if it's too hot and the temperature needs to be at 68 degrees, then they're adjusting. They're pumping cold air into that room. Okay. If it's too low and they need to pump out warm air, like, that's what they're doing. They're adjusting the temperature. They're analyzing, then adjusting. Coach Fuente, coach at Virginia Tech, who I love, and he is awesome. He talks about how leaders do opposite. Leaders do opposite. So when the team's too low, right? Say you come off like a really, really bad loss and they're down in the dumps. They're coming in ultra positive. Hey guys, we're good to go. Let's get ourselves back up. Let's get ready to rock and roll next week. When the team might be too high, maybe getting complacent, they're able to come in and say, hey guys, let's focus back in on the process. Let's understand what it takes to be great. Let's not be results driven. Let's be process driven, right? Leaders have this uncanny ability to be able to analyze the temperature in the room and then go and set the right temperature, right? But that comes not from being passive, but from being passionate. So the first thing that you're responsible for is the energy in the room. The second thing you're responsible for, and we have to take extreme ownership of this, okay, is the execution. You're responsible for that. Jocko Willink says there's no such thing as bad teams, just bad leaders. There's no such thing as bad teams, just bad leaders. Now, we have to understand that the team's performance, if we are a leader, it's in our hands. It's in our hands. And not to say it's all on us and for us to hold tightly to everything. That's for us to say, hey man, I've got to actually develop the people around me. And I've got to always find a solution. We've got to have the mentality that there is always a way. When things are going south, are you the passive one and the disconnected one? Or are you stepping in and are you fighting for your team and fighting for that execution, always trying to find a way? Like, what are you doing in that situation? So, leaders, you are responsible for the energy and the execution of your team. Take extreme ownership of that and allow yourself the ability to constantly recalibrate. All right, see where the team's at. Let me detach for a second. Let me recalibrate and then put in the appropriate plan. And we talked about last time how constant feedback is really necessary for humble leaders who value others over themselves. But we've got to allow ourselves that opportunity to detach, recalibrate, operate with passion, understand there's always a way. So you are responsible for the energy and the execution of your team. All right, so first it starts with you. Take care of yourself. Have higher standards for yourself and believe in everything that God has called you to be. And don't be passive in the way that you take care of yourself. Not for you, but for other people, for the people that you are leading. You have not been called to be average. And then for your team, understand that you impact your team in so many ways and you are responsible for the energy and the execution. The truth is most teams will mirror their leader. They will mirror their leader. That doesn't mean that the team doesn't sometimes have bad days and there's not some bad apples that kind of affect the group, but general statement, the teams reflect the leader. And that's what we need to take ownership of, okay? So we're responsible for the energy and execution. All right, let's transition. Let's transition to husbands. Now this one is really, really important. And I've got to make sure I phrase this the right way because sometimes when I talk on here, I'm going to speak in generalities. There's always different situations and there's probably not a one rule for every single situation. I know there's not. There's very minimal rules in life that I believe that are black and white. There is gray area, but allow me to speak to this because I do think this next statement can be mostly true. Okay. When a husband becomes disconnected from his wife due to his fault, and what I mean by that is maybe work just got crazy and he stopped pursuing his wife. Maybe he was hurt, maybe emotionally hurt, and he didn't bring it up and got disconnected. There's certain things that end up following. You might start looking at things you shouldn't. You might start lusting after things that you shouldn't. And worse, your wife might try to find that somewhere else. I am not saying that every time a man is cheated on, that is the man's fault. Not at all. I am not saying that. But what I am saying is you've been called to pursue your wife. You've been called to pursue her. And we need to take ownership of that responsibility. Take ownership of that. Okay. So the question is, are you connected to your wife? Do you still date your wife? Do you still take intentional time to pursue your wife, to laugh with your wife, to look at your wife? And the more responsibilities you get, the more intentional you have to be. And gosh, it's in the little moments, right? Like it's in the goodbyes before you leave in the morning. It's the kiss before you leave in the morning, and it's the embrace when you come home. It's those little things. It's looking them in the eyes. It's planning date nights. It's pursuing them. It's taking time to just look in their eyes, to look in your wife's eyes and just and love them and care for them. And it's not always going to be easy, but what we can't do is become passive in this responsibility. We cannot afford to become passive in this responsibility. When I was at the Senior Bowl, this coach, who I'm not sure if this coach knew Jesus, loved Jesus or anything, he said something really, really profound. He was kind of getting to know the running backs and fullbacks in the room, and he was kind of asking us about our situations. And there was one running back in the room who was not married to the mother of his child. So he was kind of talking about that and maybe complaining a little bit about the mother of his child. And the running back coach looked at him and he said, the greatest thing you can do for your kid is to love the kid's mom. And I was like, gosh, dang, that is a profound statement. Even more so for us as husbands. My first responsibility is actually not to my sons, Caleb and Lucas. My first responsibility is to my wife. That is my first responsibility. And man, it is so easy because, gosh, when my first boy Caleb was born and when Lucas was born, like you're looking at them and you're like crying and you're so in love. It's easy to just shift our focus just to our kids and get our identity in just being a dad. Well, first, my identity is in following Jesus. And then second, I'm called to love my wife and then love my kids, because that's actually loving my kids well, is loving my wife. And I want Caleb and Lucas to know that I am crazy about my wife, that I am crazy about her. My wife comes first, and I need to operate in that, and I need to be held accountable to that. I need my friends to help me do that. But my responsibility first is to my wife. Okay, you're not in this partnership where it's like, all right, Lauren, if you give me what I want, then I'll give you what you want. That's not what it's like. We talked about that last week. It's about laying down our lives for our wife. Now, there's this unavoidable thing in Scripture that men specifically have been called to, and it's headship in the home. It says, man is the head of the woman, husband is the head of the wife. And we have twisted this. We talked about this at length last week. We have twisted this into being this domineering position. That's not what it is. It is this sacrificial position. It's the position of leadership that Jesus himself took. It's that position of leadership. It is laying down our lives for our wife. And if we have to constantly tell someone that we are the leader, then we're probably not a very good leader. Like, believe it or not, I'm the head coach at Hanover High School. I haven't once gone around to the assistants and say, hey, remember, I'm the head coach. Hey, remember, I'm the head coach. Hey, no good leader would ever do that. But I hope that I'm laying down my life for my assistants. I hope that I'm laying down my life for someone much, much, much more than my assistant. But the person that has been joined together with me as one, I hope that I'm laying down my life for her the way that Jesus has laid down his life for me. And I can't take that role lightly. Remember what we talked about last week. Remember what we talked about in that last episode. What we were saying was that what we've been called to as the husband is to lay down our to lay down our life for our wife and to give ourselves up for her. Even if it means betrayal, even if it means that she turns on us, we're still called to lay down our life. We can't avoid that responsibility. We can't do that. So I'm begging you, don't check out. Do not check out. Do not check out on that responsibility. It is a huge, huge and joyful responsibility to lay down our life for our wife and to love her and to care for her. When I walk around at Hanover, and I kind of poke at our players and mess with them a little bit, and they're like walking around with a girl, I'll be like, hey, listen to me. And I'll talk to that girl and I'll say, don't you ever date a passive man. Don't you ever date a passive man. And that the player will start laughing and whatever. Don't date a passive man. But I am serious in that. Don't date a passive man. A man that can't initiate with you. A man that can't love you and care for you. A man that just tries to be cool and passive, that makes you pursue him. Man, that's not the man you need to be around. Something that I love that Lauren has done for me. When we were talking in high school, you go through the talking stage, and you go to dating and all that other stuff. When we were talking in high school, it was our junior year. And I thought I was big time. I was a quarterback in high school. I thought I was the man, which wasn't true, but that's what I thought. And I had, this is going to sound super arrogant, but I had girls that would like text me first and pursue me, right? Like that's what I thought, like that's how I thought it worked. So I really liked Lauren. So what I would do is I would text her one day. I created this stupid little game. I would text her one day and then I would leave a gap day to see if she would text me first. And then I would text her the next day, and we'd have a conversation, and then I would leave a gap day to see if she would text me first. And she didn't like kind of fill in the gap days, so I assumed she didn't like me. So we kind of like stopped talking. And then one of her friends came up to me and was like, Sam, why did you stop talking to Lauren? I was like, what do you mean? She didn't text me during the gap day. She's like, what are you talking about? Like, she liked you. And what happened was she got another relationship that year, and I kind of got another relationship, and we missed out on a year of being together. And I found out that she just didn't text guys first. That's not what she did. And I pray that my daughter is that way. If a man really cares about you, he will pursue you first. Now, that being said, I am not saying that the relationships that have started because the woman pursued the man that you're doomed. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that men, we are called to initiate. So even now that you're in that relationship, even though she might have pursued you and helped start and kindle that relationship, that is okay. But now it's your job to pursue her and love her and lay down your life for her, right? So this relationship that I thought I had my junior year, I didn't really have because I wasn't stepping up to initiate these conversations. Now, I will say this. The next year, when we were both available, I was very clear and I did initiate those conversations, and I made sure that like I wasn't going to lose out on that opportunity again. And then 4 years later, after that, we get engaged. Rest is history, going up on 7 years of marriage here July 1st. So pumped about that. But my wife did this awesome thing. She was like, I'm not going to pursue you first. If you love me, I want you to pursue me. And what an awesome, I'm so grateful that she's done that. She's taught me, and she didn't even know this, she taught me how to be a man, taught me how to initiate. She said, I'm not going to give in to a boy. I will make you be a man. What an awesome thing that she did. So, men, the headship, the leadership that we've been called to is not what we think. But we can't avoid that responsibility. That responsibility is to lay down our life for her in every way. To lay down our life. That's what leadership looks like. Do not check out on that role. Do not check out on that role. All right, let's transition to fathers, to being a dad. What it looks like to be passionate over passive as a dad. All right, think about this for a second. You're tired, you come home from work, you've had a long week, you got a lot of responsibilities at work, you got a lot of responsibilities with the different things that you're leading, and you just want to break for a second. So you come home and you're like, all right, buddy, you guys just watch some TV for a little bit, and I'm going to go in the other room and I'm just going to decompress for a little bit, and you kind of just put a screen in front of their face. And I'm not saying that we never allow our kids to watch TV. I'm not saying that. I commend people that do that. But in that moment, maybe we give in and we check out. Well, then maybe we get in the habit and we do it the next day. And then we do it the next day. And then we do it the next day. And we're just becoming passive, and we are giving up this responsibility to be intentional with our sons and with our daughters. We're giving up that responsibility. What are you putting in front of their face as far as the screens? What are you allowing them to eat? What are you allowing them to listen to? Especially when they're really young. Some people get annoyed with me. They're like, Sam, just let your son live. Just let him eat this sugar. Like, stop being so uptight about this stuff. Let him eat this. Let him eat that. I'm like, hey guys, Caleb is 3. Okay? Like, who is this really about if we're giving him this stuff? Is it about us, or is it about us just being about our convenience? Is it about our kid, or is it about our convenience just to be able to easily just give them just a simple little snack? It's just one. Don't worry about it. When we do that, when we operate in the when we operate, it's just one, relax. Gosh, it's going to lead to the next one. It's going to lead to the next one. And it's going to lead to the next one. Let's be passionate about what we're doing. And again, I'm not saying we're perfect, and I'm not saying we never turned on a show, but we want to be intentional about what they are watching. We want to be intentional about what they are consuming. Guys, they're not 18, 19, 20, 21, 20. They're not making their own decisions right now. They're 3 and 4 and 5. They shouldn't be making their own decisions. We should be taking that leadership and stepping in and saying, hey, I want what's best for you. That's why I'm doing this. I'm not doing it to be mean. I'm not doing it to be harsh, but my responsibility is to lead and care for you, to lay down my life for you. And a lot of the times when we do that stuff, it's not because we're trying to help them. It's because it's convenient for us. It's because we don't want them to get upset for a brief moment. Gosh, you want to find bipolar people? Talk to 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, right? Like they might be sad for a second. You can make them laugh just like that. Go tickle them. And then they're laughing again. So it's not really about them. So we don't have to say that. We don't have to make that excuse. It's about us just kind of stressing out and we just want to break for a second. And again, I'm not saying we're perfect in that, but it's worth thinking through. Am I just checking out for my own convenience? Am I intentional about the time that I spend with them? Am I intentional about the words that I speak over them? That's something that I want to constantly check myself on. Am I intentional about speaking over them? Hey, Caleb, Lucas, I love you and I'm for you. Am I intentional about emotionally trying to connect with them? Yes, even my 1-year-old, looking them in the eyes and trying to make them laugh, trying to smile with them, kissing them, hugging them, loving them, and caring for him. Man, I want my sons to know that I absolutely adore them and love them and that I'm for them. And anytime I say no, it's for their protection or it's for their good. It's for their protection or for their good. It's not because I'm trying to be harsh. I would not do that. Anytime I say no, it's because I actually really, really love them. I'm not trying to be Mr. Tough Guy. I'm trying to take extreme ownership of my responsibility with great enthusiasm and caring for them. Okay? So we can't avoid that responsibility. We can't give up that responsibility. Guys, we're talking about embracing some uncomfortability for a little bit. We're talking about going outside and playing with them, even when you're tired. We're talking about, yes, going back and playing on that train table again. We're talking about talking to the 3-year-old who's got a million questions and asks why a million times. Yeah, we're talking about that. We're talking about that. Let's go back to that. Let's go back and be with them. Man, I have to check myself, even when I get home, to not just be on my phone doing work stuff, doing football, doing leader. I got to check myself on that. I got to put it down and I've got to engage with my wife first and then with my boys, because that's a great, great responsibility that I've been given. And tying this all back together to what we talked about with personal leadership, man, like my boys are looking to me to see what is it like to be a man, and even more so, what is it like to be a follower of Jesus? I want to make sure I'm modeling that well. If I don't care what I'm putting in my body, if I don't care the way that I live, that the healthy lifestyle that I live or unhealthy lifestyle, if I don't care about that, well, it's going to be no surprise if they don't care about it. If I'm not intentional about that, if I'm not showing them that it's important, well, it's going to be no surprise if they don't think that's important. It's going to be no surprise. What am I modeling for them? Another thing is, like, my kids are going to look at me, their dad, and that's going to be their first impression of what they view of God, because they're going to hear that God is their father. And then they're going to see me, their dad. And they're going to superimpose me on the father. And I'm not going to be perfect. I'm not calling for us to be perfect. But I am saying I don't want to minimize that. I want to make sure that I'm giving everything I have and I'm not giving up that responsibility. So check back in. Give yourself permission, no matter what you've done before, to recalibrate and give it everything you have. As a husband, as a dad, as a leader, recalibrate and check back in. Now, followers of Jesus, lovingly, I'm including myself in this. Let's wake up. Let's wake up. Let's wake up, one, to what's going on around us, but wake up to the love that the Father has for us. Let's wake up to that. Wouldn't it be alarming if we go and we step into eternity and we're seeing Jesus face to face and we find out that 99.99999% of the things that we cared about have no importance, that they have no importance? Wouldn't that be concerning? If we step into eternity and we realize that what we were toiling for, what we were working for, actually didn't matter. Man, every breath you have is important. And it's an opportunity to glorify your Father in heaven. Don't miss these opportunities. Don't let them just go right by. Let's wake up to the reality that Jesus is King and He is with you and He loves you and He's for you. Let's wake up to that reality. I was reading in Joel this morning. And Joel is a prophet. And these prophets literally are called to like kind of wake their people up to the reality of God, to the reality of who he is. And I'm going to read from this. And it literally starts off, it says, "Wake up, you drunkards, and weep. Wail, all you drinkers of wine. Wail because of the new wine, for it has been snatched from your lips. A nation has invaded my land, a mighty army without number. It has the teeth of a lion." So Joel is living in this time when the kingdom of Israel is split up between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and there's just turmoil. There's this period where there's good kings and there's bad kings, and it's not the way that God intended it to be. And he's calling his people, and he says, and he's a prophet in the southern kingdom. He's calling his people and says, "Wake up. Understand what's going on. Open your eyes. Open your eyes. Don't just go with what everybody else is doing. Don't just follow along. We are in this situation because of the decisions that we have made. Wake up. Wake up." What happened was people just became numb to the reality of God. Not a couple years ago, last December, maybe even before that, I can't remember the exact timeline. Might have been in 2022. That's when it was. It was December of 2022. I felt like the Lord spoke to me. And when I say that, I don't say like I heard an audible voice. Like I'll get thoughts in my head that I can't get rid of. And I just feel like it's the Lord downloading that on my heart and on my mind. And I feel like he said, if you were to see me face to face right now, 1, would you be ready? And 2, would you be excited? 1, would you be ready? 2, would you be excited? Would you be ready to see me face to face? Would you be excited about that? And then also, like, what would today look like if tomorrow I was going to see him face to face? So these thoughts are kind of like swirling in my head. And I would be driving down the road, and at times, like I would just like break down in tears, like listening to worship music, because I was like, Lord, I want to see you and I want to know you. And the more like I connected with the Father, the more I was like, man, I would want that right now. I would want that in this moment. And you have these intense, like almost like cravings for Jesus and for his love and for his grace. And in those moments, you're just wondering like, man, if I truly knew that tomorrow I was going to see him face to face, I would operate with less worry today, less fear today. You see Paul kind of talk about this. He's like talking about how he desires to depart this earth and go be with the Lord. He's like, I'm torn between the two. Should I stay here and live out my purpose and know that I've been called to you, or do I desire more to depart and be with you face to face? And he wasn't considering killing himself. He wasn't considering that. He was just saying like, man, which one do I desire more? And it was hard for him. He goes, but nevertheless, I know I've been called here. I know I've been called here. So he lived with this awareness for eternity. Bill Johnson said this. He said, our ability to endure in the present is directly correlated to our awareness of eternity. Our ability to endure in the present is directly correlated to our awareness of eternity. Are we aware? Are we woken up to eternity? Are we woken up to the fact that we are not temporal beings? We are not here for just a short time and then it's over no matter what. We are eternal beings, and we have a Savior that loves us, that is for us, that is with us, that bled on the cross for us, that rose from the grave for us. We have a Savior that wants to be with us, that wants to bring us back home. Are we aware of that? Because we will see him face to face. And I pray that I'm looking him face to face with tears, knowing that I gave everything I had, that I did not wait, that I did not waste one moment to be with him. One of the reasons we named Caleb, because we just value that story in scripture so much. The story of Caleb. Man, if you get a chance, read that story. It is unbelievable. But he's one of the spies that go into the promised land. There's 12 spies that go into the promised land to see if they should go and take over. Right? And 10 of the spies come back and say, no, there's giants there. We're going to get killed. It's awful. It's terrible. No. And then 2 of the spies, Caleb and Joshua, come back and say, it's ours. Let's go take it. We'll talk about that story more in that victor over victim video, but it's worth talking about right now when you think about passionately living out your life, because I want to give you context for who Caleb is. When they finally overtake the promised land, and Caleb and Joshua of that crew were the only ones allowed to enter the promised land. When they enter it, Caleb is 80 years old, and he says, I'm going to take the hardest land. I'm as strong now as I was in my youth. Give me the hardest land. That is unbelievable. That is a man that was living passionately. That was not living passive. He didn't adopt this retirement mentality of, I've already done my time of hard work. Now it's time for me to relax and just wait until I die. He didn't operate in that mentality. He said, I have a pulse. I have a purpose. I'm as strong now as I was in my youth. Man, that is the way that I want to live. The name Caleb means wholehearted, strong, and brave. And that's what we speak over our son. That Caleb, you are strong, you are brave, you do everything with all of your heart, you do not quit. Man, that is a life that I want to live. That's a life that I want to live. So Joel's going through this. He's like, wake up. We're in this turmoil because of the decisions we made. We've turned from God, and that's why. And then it goes, and this is the love of our Father. It goes through all of that, saying how bad it's gotten. And this is what he says, even now declares the Lord, return to me with all of your heart, with fasting and weeping and mourning. Rend your heart. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in love. And he relents from sending calamity. Who knows? He may turn and relent and leave behind a blessing, a grain offering, a drink offering for the Lord. And he goes on to talk about how he's going to pour out his spirit. He says, afterward, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, which was a bold statement in that time to make, to say your sons and your daughters. There will be one spirit. There will be one Lord. There will be one baptism. Sons and daughters will be able to prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. Even on my servants, even on the slaves, even on everyone, he will pour out his spirit, both men and women. I will pour out my spirit in those days. And guys, those are the days that we are living in right now. He has poured out his spirit on all of us who believe. When you accept Jesus as Savior, he gives you the Holy Spirit. When we trust in him, when we trust in that gift and we live for him, he has poured out his spirit on us and he has adopted us into the family. And we are forever a son. We are forever a daughter. You have a purpose. You have a reason for living, and everything you do is important. And it's valuable. So believers, followers of Jesus, wake up. Wake up. If you claim to believe in him, wake up. It's not about your truth. It's not about twisting this book to make it fit our lives. It's about saying, Lord, everything you have, I want. I want to follow you with all that I have. I want to lay down my life for you because you did that for me. It's not about my truth. It's about his truth. And I want to form my life to what he says, not try to twist scripture to fit my comfortability. He will pour out his spirit on all of us. That is the promise when we accept this gift of eternal life. So man, don't take 1 second for granted. Go live with passion. Go own your responsibilities with enthusiasm. You've been called for more. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk. You are a son, you are a daughter of the highest King. He loves you, he is for you, he won't leave you. Go take that step with the awareness of eternity. Go live passionately. Love you guys. So excited to do this with you. Let me know what you think. Talk to you later.